Everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I am Rev KC Taylor, and I love that this month we're diving into home because when I moved to Oklahoma, the Tulsa family made me feel welcome immediately. Right after I met with Rev Lynn Newicki at the United Life Center. She said, "Oh, Reverend Jeff is so excited to meet you." Reverend Jeff friended me on Facebook immediately, like just sent me all kinds of messages of love and support. And to be honest, like I was like, great, like hooray, Oklahoma is making me feel welcome. Like it was I was getting a whole lot of love when I got here. And when I went to the Center for Spiritual Living conference in Palm Springs, Reverend Jeff saw me, gave me a big hug, and I like from a Facebook photo, I don't know how he knew me behind a mask, but I felt so welcome. And I hadn't even set up my very first day to speak here, but I was told that you all were inviting guest speakers, and I was somebody. Lolita reached out to me right away and got me on the schedule, and it's been an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful that Reverend Jeff is stepping into senior leadership. It's Tulsa feels like the sister city to Oklahoma City, and so with Oklahoma making me feel so much at home, I'm so grateful for this community. So today, as we're diving in further to this concept of home, today's theme is H.O.M.E, which stands for Healing Opportunities Manifest Everywhere. And the Global Themes team identified that this year being the holidays in the United States, the holiday season is kind of beginning this week. And the Global Themes team recognized that the holiday season is not as joyful for everyone. That some of us, like, I'll admit, like, I'm going to Chicago for Thanksgiving. My house was decorated in Christmas decorations the first week of November. Like, I'm all for that. I love the lights. I love the music. I'm waiting for the radio stations to click over to start singing, to do Christmas music. I am all for it. I'm a giant Mariah fan, and Mariah is also known as the Queen of Christmas. And so, having been a Mariah fan since I was 9 years old when she first hit the scene, and her being like a representation of Christmas, I feel like seen and supported and loved. And the themes team really recognized that I am in many ways a minority, and in this particular way, the global themes team pointed out that there is this study about adverse childhood experiences. It's called ACEs, and that ACEs, there's 10 ACEs, and these are indicators about what someone's childhood looked like. And it's things like experiencing divorce as childhood, experiencing physical abuse, sexual abuse, just trauma. And there are 10 specific triggers that have been identified. And children with higher ACE scores, people who grew up with more trauma, having more trauma around family, are more likely to be incarcerated, more likely to experience poverty. And the Centers for Disease Control recognized that it was the #1 indicator for people to experience obesity, high blood pressure. It has a specific and significant impact on people's well-being and physical health. And 2/3 of the global population scores at least 1 on the ACEs score. And I am in the minority of the third of the global population that has a 0. And the reason I just happen to know this, they didn't provide the specifics of the score in the source material this week, but I went to it was a 3-day training on home housing for youth. And Canada has all kinds of resources in place. First, the federal government devotes a lot of money and resources and efforts to supporting people who are experiencing housing instability. And the social organizations are coming up with all of these very progressive ways of making people feel supported and helping youth who are experiencing housing instability move into more stable housing. And so in many ways, this this 3-day training was eye-opening of all the amazing things that Canada is doing. But working in a shelter myself, it was a lot of these things we felt like our hands were tied. But we talked a lot about that experience of ACEs and how that experience of childhood trauma does not have to define us. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." So regardless of whether somebody has a 0, a 1, a 10, obviously it's a lot more work to heal trauma when somebody is on that 10. And I can completely understand that going home for the holidays, going to one's place of origin may bring up some things, especially if there's some unhealed trauma from the past, or if there's some toxic experiences still happening in the present. I had a conversation with somebody just this week about with an invitation to go home for Thanksgiving, and are called by a name that they don't use and called by pronouns that they don't use. And so they didn't feel safe going to their spending time with their family of origin, spending the holidays with their family of origin specifically for this reason. And I recognize that the challenges that I had when I came out in like 2000, something along there, the conversation about LGBT equality had really just started in America. And there was a lot of anti-gay rhetoric that was at the forefront of American conversation. And also at that same time, my family, not my parents, but my extended family is very religious, identifies as Christian, and they were very uncomfortable with the fact that I chose to live my life out loud, that I did not hide, that I showed up with whatever woman I was dating at the time at the Thanksgiving table. And we had very uncomfortable Thanksgivings. And eventually they got over it. The fact that I bring women home is not even a thing. 20 years later, because I said this was 2000, 22 years later, this is not even a problem. And so I got an opportunity to really look at an experience that could have really been seen as trauma, as how my family has grown and shifted in a way that my identity is no longer something anybody thinks twice about, and that their love for me as their niece, as their cousin, it as an aunt supersedes any sort of conversation that's happening out there of anti-gay rhetoric. They moved beyond and transcended that. And so it's nice to be able to live by example and to understand where youth is coming from, but also encourage them to make the effort to sit down at that table, to identify their own boundaries and move through the experience in a way that they feel like best serves them. I really appreciate the fact that you all performed this song about home and the concept of listening to that divine presence within us and allowing that presence to guide us every step of the journey. As we talk about home, the first week was "There's no place like home." And that reminds all of us of The Wizard of Oz. I imagine all of us have seen that movie at this point of our lives. And Dorothy's journey is representative of that hero's journey that each one of us are on. And I think a lot of us have a tendency to forget that when we are caught up in what is happening in the world, caught up in facing an event or an experience that we may not be looking forward to, that in those moments we don't necessarily feel very heroic. Today, I was reading a book called The Way of Tenderness. My Spirit Uncensored, which is the organization that I run virtual services through on Wednesday nights, we're doing a book club the second Wednesday of every month. And The Way of Tenderness by a Buddhist monk. Her name is Zenju. Zenju is the only thing that's coming to me right now. But I was reading this book, and this woman talks about her experience of studying Buddhism and being a Black woman and a queer woman and learning what oneness means in the experience of feeling the trauma of what comes along with identities that are not embraced, that are not historically embraced. To fight for representation, to have to fight to exist, and finding a way to incorporate and embrace the experience of oneness, and that to know that what oneness means does not mean that our experience of identity is erased. What it means is that we express in a variety of different ways, and that however we express, however we are born, whatever identities we have are a divine appointment, that we are who we are in this moment in history for a very specific reason. We have come here to do good things. And one of my favorite reasons for why I love speaking to Centers for Spiritual Living is because each person is demonstrating themselves already to be a hero, that we've already denied the concept of spirit being this old white guy in the sky, and look at the experience of spirituality as oneness, knowing that it's not restricted to race, that it's not restricted to gender, that it is inclusive of all races, that it is inclusive of all genders, that it is inclusive of all expressions of humanity and life itself, that spirit itself is diverse, spirit itself is abundant, and spirit expresses itself in every single way there is to express, an infinite amount of ways, and it continues to do that. And each one of us has chosen to show up, chosen to participate, chosen to engage in a spiritual community that teaches that serves as a voice for love in our own communities, that regardless of what's happening in politics, what's happening with conversations on social media, that each person here shows up for these services, for these messages, to be reminded of the fact that spirit is expressing as us at all times, in all ways, and all moments. And as we are coming up to the end of the year, one of the things, personal experiences that I like to engage in is a reflection practice. I love to spend the end of the year in, I do a burning bowl a lot of the time with my friends. We'll come together and do a meditation and identify a quality that no longer serves us, put it in a bowl, set it on fire, and then identify a new quality that we're stepping into the next year with. And so I say I've done this with my friends, like, we were live in person in Chicago for a long time, and in COVID, we did a burning bowl through Zoom. And this year, I plan to do a burning bowl with Spirit Uncensored, but instead, I ended up designing a New Year's Eve kind of mini retreat in Oklahoma City. So if y'all are interested, it's only $50, and it's a 2-day experience where the 31st, that happens to fall on a Saturday, is an experience of reflection and meditation, of reflecting on the year, on the last day of the year. And then on the 1st, we will engage in a meditation and a series of activities and workshops on claiming whichever qualities that we like in 2023. And so around this time of year, I really like to spend time thinking about my year, thinking about, instead of this being something that I do one night of the year, that I really spend some time and energy reflecting on how I've shown up, what I'm proud of, what qualities I express that I feel good about. What do I want to lean into further? How do I want to express? And what do I think? What qualities do I think leaning into further will remind me of that? So for 2022, my theme, I like to do a theme. This year was best year ever. Last year, I used trust God was my thing. And it makes perfect sense, where in 2021, I made this huge jump of recognizing that the life that I was living wasn't working for me. I didn't know that when I chose trust God as my quality, but I knew something was shifting, and I didn't know what, and I didn't know how. And I recognized that I needed to be present, be quiet, and listen to spirit, listen to that inner voice, guide me to wherever home would be, knowing that Los Angeles no longer felt like home, and there was somewhere new to go, something new to do. And I just stayed present and listened and allowed myself to be guided to Oklahoma. And so when I got to Oklahoma, it's like, all right, this is the place, this is the time. I am the person who I've always wanted to be. I'm showing up free and authentic and not restricted by no one knows me here. So there are no expectations of who I am and who I've been before. I get a real opportunity to have the cleanest slate possible. So this year I choose to allow to be my best year ever. And how that has looked for me is not exactly, I was going to say it was exactly, but it wasn't. It was not exactly at all what I had anticipated. I had no idea that I was going to get married in 2021 at the top of the year. I knew Elle and I were going to get married eventually. I just didn't know it was going to be that year. I had no idea that we would celebrate our honeymoon in Hawaii. No clue when I started this year. And I expected that I would finish the book that I was writing. I feel really good about where that is and how that is. But I think in my mind, when I said best year ever, I pictured like huge things. I expected this to be the year that I got staffed as a TV writer on my first series. And this has been a goal of mine for like pretty much my entire life. So I thought this was the year that was going to happen. And there hasn't been a lot of movement towards that. I've been submitted for some shows. My agent's definitely sending my stuff around. Every time I see that there's a show picked up that sounds interesting, I say to my agent, hey, would you submit me to this? And she says, I submitted you a month ago, and this is what happened, and this is what they said. So, my scripts are getting out there. I'm having clarity on what the next things I'm gonna write for 2023 are. I'm planning to write a comedy series that's inspired by my time in the shelter. And I've got another idea based on a neighborhood bar that I hang out in. So, like I had a vision, like what best year ever would look like, what it would look like in the world, how it would manifest. But in reality, what manifested is a clarity within me, is the fact that I show up, like I said, authentic in every space that I am, and that my relationships have healed. As we're having this conversation about home and Thanksgiving, as I mentioned, I'm going to Chicago this year. Last year, I could have gone to Chicago for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but ultimately chose not to. Last year was such a whirlwind of a year of leaving a marriage behind and meeting someone who felt like my soulmate in Oklahoma very shortly after having arrived, that my family's head was spinning. The same family that had a hard time wrapping their head around my sexual orientation is the same family that had a hard time wrapping around the fact that I have fallen in love with somebody right after I left this marriage. And so they were not the most supportive of it. And my ex that happened to be in Chicago for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I was just giving them their distance, giving them an opportunity to grieve the relationship that I had left behind, and maintain their relationships. That I never wanted our divorce to mean that my family does not get to continue to have a relationship with them. And so they continue to hang out and go on vacations and do all these things. And I felt a whole lot of judgment coming towards me. And so I just prayed on it, stayed present with it, found home in Oklahoma City, hosted Thanksgiving in my own home, and enjoyed myself. And this year, my family has come 360. They've met her, they love her, came to the wedding. And so I'm stepping into this experience of Thanksgiving this year in a very different way. But I'm so grateful to recognize that this acronym of home, healing, opportunities, manifest everywhere is understanding that things may not look the way that we want them to look all the time, or may not feel the way that we want them to feel. But anytime that happens, it is an opportunity for a shift. It is an opportunity for growth. And one of the other things that was pointed out in the source material this month is how Ernest Holmes talked about how, like, ask this question of why do we have to go through struggle? Why does it have to hurt? Why does it have to be hard? And the reality of it is because it's how we grow. It's how we learn that growth comes with pain. And Joseph Campbell, who came up with this concept of the hero's journey, said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. That every experience of fear and pain and anger and frustration is an opportunity to dig deeper and discover the treasure within, is an opportunity to step away from home, find ourselves, and then come right back to celebrate who we are and help create space for family members who may be uncomfortable with how we show up, especially being New Thought people. I imagine most every single one of us did not come from in a family where New Thought is taught across the board, that some of us might be considered weird for what we believe in because we don't have a traditional idea of what spirit is. But in many ways, we do have a traditional idea of what spirit is. And I'm grateful for the fact that we're willing to see through that. We can understand that the spirit itself that's represented in every single religious books are all the same thing, and that all of the cultural traditions that we have around connecting consciously with that presence within, allowing that presence to guide us from moment to moment, day to day, decision to decision, that's what we're doing, that we are honoring the presence of God within ourselves and knowing that it is that same presence that is in every single book ever written about spirit, that spirit did not stop talking 5,000 years ago, that God didn't say everything that he had to say back then, and there's been nothing else over the course of the last 5,000 years. We fully understand that spirit is always expressing, and that spirit is not limited by any one religion, any one faith tradition, any one culture, that spirit is transcendent, and that we do the best that we can to be conscious of the fact of that one presence, to understand that every experience of frustration is an opportunity to see a healing opportunity, or that every experience of darkness and fear and doubt is an opportunity to seek the treasure that lies within. And I am so grateful to be a part of this community, so grateful to speak with you all, and would love for us to pray together around this concept of leaning into allowing our inner hero to emerge, to move through the darkness, and to allow for light to appear. So I invite each one of us to get comfortable in the spaces that we are in, to settle in and recognize what a divine appointment this is, as was declared before this talk began. What a divine appointment this is, that each one of us has chosen to show up and understand that every experience is perfect, is divine, that spirit itself is perfection expressing as us at all times, in all ways, and all moments. And I'm so grateful to trust and know that each one of us is inspired to respond to challenging experiences in our lives by seeking healing opportunities, by understanding that these healing opportunities are manifesting everywhere at all times and all ways. And then we get to experience the joy that comes along with it, the joy of finding the treasure, the joy of finding the light, the joy of living from that light, and the joy of trusting and knowing that spirit is guiding every step of our journey, that spirit always knows what it's doing, and that we can never take a wrong step, that regardless of how scary something may look, spirit is present at all times, in all ways, and all moments. And I am so grateful that together we are affirming this truth and this knowing in prayer here and now. And in gratitude, I invite each one of us to experience the good that comes along with the prosperity and the blessings and the connection and the love that manifests as a result of this prayer here and now. And I invite each one of us to affirm this truth, this word, by saying, and so it is. Namaste.